The stars above Earth disappeared behind metal. Thousands of alien ships filled the sky, each one larger than any building humanity had ever built. They came without warning, dropping out of faster-than-light travel like ghosts materializing in the night. Within minutes, every telescope, every satellite, every pair of eyes looking up saw the same terrifying sight. Captain Hyanwu was drinking coffee when the alarms screamed. He commanded Sentinel-7, an orbital defense station that circled Earth like a watchful guardian. The coffee floated away in zero gravity as he rushed to the command deck. His crew was already there, staring at screens filled with red warnings. The alien fleet stretched beyond the moon, a wall of ships that seemed endless. The message came in every language humans spoke. A voice, cold and mechanical, declared the terms. Humanity had 72 hours to surrender. They would disarm every weapon. They would accept new rulers. They would become servants of something called the Dominion. The alternative was simple: total destruction. The voice explained that resistance was pointless. 12 species served the Dominion across 3,000 star systems. None had ever refused and survived. On Earth, President G1 called an emergency meeting. Leaders from every nation gathered in a secure bunker beneath Geneva. The room buzzed with fear and anger. Some argued they had no choice. The alien fleet could destroy Earth 100 times over. Others spoke of dignity and freedom. Admiral Taman, commander of Earth's military forces, stood before a holographic display showing the enemy fleet. "They're not positioned to attack," he said, pointing at the formation. "They're positioned to intimidate. Look at the spacing. This is a show of force, not a battle formation. They expect us to break before they fire a single shot." President G1 studied the display. She was young for a world leader, only 45, but her eyes held steel. "How many times have they done this?" "According to their broadcast, they've absorbed over 200 civilizations," Admiral Taman replied. "Every single one surrendered. And they've never met anyone who said no," G1 said quietly. Engineer Subin entered the room carrying a datapad. She was the head of Earth's secret weapons program, a project so classified that most people in the room didn't know it existed. "Madam President, we have options. Not good ones, but options." The room fell silent. Subin activated her pad and new images appeared on the holographic display. Strange devices, experimental ships, weapons that bent the laws of physics. "We've been preparing for this," she said. "Not specifically for this, but for the possibility of hostile contact. Every defense station has hidden capabilities. Every orbital platform is armed. We have weapons they won't expect. Can we win?" Someone asked. Subin hesitated. "No, not in a straight fight. But we can make them bleed. We can make them regret coming here." The debate raged for hours. Some leaders wanted to negotiate, to buy time, to hope for mercy. Others spoke of dying free rather than living as slaves. President G1 listened to every voice, her face revealing nothing. When the arguments finally exhausted themselves, she stood. "I need to think," she said. "We reconvene in 6 hours." Those 6 hours felt like years. Captain Hyanwu watched the alien fleet from his station, counting ships, studying their movements. They didn't patrol. They didn't scout. They simply waited, confident and patient. His crew worked in tense silence, running checks on weapons systems that might soon be firing for the first and last time. Admiral Taman walked through the command center of the Earth Defense Fleet headquarters. Ships were being armed, crews were being briefed, and plans were being made. He saw fear in every face he passed, but also determination. Humans had fought each other for thousands of years. Now they would fight together or die together. Engineer Subin ran final calculations on her experimental weapons. The gravity well generators could tear ships apart by creating localized distortions in space. The antimatter missiles could create explosions as bright as stars. But they were all prototypes, tested only in simulations. They might not work. They might explode in Earth's face. She entered the commands anyway, readying every weapon humanity had created in secret. When the 6 hours ended, President G1 returned to the chamber. Every leader watched her, waiting for the decision that would determine humanity's fate. She stood at the head of the table and spoke in a clear, calm voice. "I've been thinking about what it means to be human," she began. "We're not the strongest species. We're not the smartest. We don't have the best technology or the biggest guns. But we have something that has kept us alive through ice ages and plagues and wars. We survive. We adapt. We refuse to give up." She looked around the room. "They think we'll surrender because we're afraid. They think fear is enough to control us. But fear is just information. It tells us danger is coming. What we do with that information defines who we are." President Ji-won's voice grew stronger. "I say we tell them no. I say we fight. Not because we can win, but because some things matter more than survival. Freedom matters. Dignity matters. The right to stand under our own sky and call it home matters." The vote was not unanimous. 5 nations chose to abstain. 3 voted against. But the majority voted to fight. President Ji-won nodded and activated the planetary broadcast system. Her face appeared on every screen, every display, every device on Earth, and in all its colonies. "People of Earth," she said, "we have been given a choice between slavery and death. I choose neither. I choose to fight. In 1 hour, we will send our answer to the Dominion. Not in words, but in fire." Exactly 1 hour later, every defense station, every ship, every orbital cannon powered up simultaneously. Energy signatures blazed across space like 1,000 suns being born. Captain Hyan-woo watched his weapons come online, each system glowing green and ready. Admiral Taemin's fleet formed battle lines. Engineer Subin's experimental weapons hummed with barely contained power. The Dominion fleet received the message clearly. Humanity would not bow. The countdown to war had begun. The Dominion's response came swift and terrible. Their ships opened fire on Mars first, targeting the mining colonies that supplied Earth with resources. Massive energy beams cut through the thin atmosphere, turning settlements into craters of molten glass. Europa's ice stations exploded in silence, their domes cracking open to the void. Within the first 10 minutes of war, 8,000 humans died. The Dominion expected panic. They expected Earth to see the price of defiance and immediately surrender. Instead, they received return fire from directions they hadn't anticipated. Hidden weapons platforms emerged from what looked like communication satellites. Civilian freighters dropped their disguises and revealed missile batteries. Even the old space station that everyone thought was abandoned suddenly blazed with weapons fire, Captain. Hyan-woo stood on Sentinel-7's command deck and gave the order he'd hoped he'd never give. Activate the gravity wells. All of them. Maximum power. His crew worked quickly, their training overcoming their fear. The experimental generators spun up, creating invisible distortions in the fabric of space itself. 3 Dominion cruisers approaching the station suddenly found themselves pulled in different directions. Their hulls screamed as opposing forces tore them apart. Metal twisted. Shields collapsed. The ships came apart like paper in a storm. The Dominion had never seen weapons like this. They'd never encountered a species that could manipulate gravity as a weapon. Their formations broke as captains tried to avoid the deadly zones around Earth's defense stations. That moment of confusion was exactly what Admiral Taemin had been waiting for. "All ships, advance," he ordered. "Make them chase us into the net." The Earth's defense fleet turned toward the planet, appearing to retreat. The Dominion fleet followed, sensing weakness. They pushed forward eagerly, ready to crush the humans and end this brief rebellion. They flew straight into the largest minefield in human history. Thousands of autonomous drones had been hiding in Earth's orbital debris field for years. They looked like space junk, pieces of old satellites and discarded rocket stages. When the Dominion ships entered their range, they came alive. Small, fast, and impossible to track individually, they swarmed the alien vessels like angry hornets. Each drone carried enough explosive to punch through armor. Hundreds of drones meant hundreds of holes in every ship. The space around Earth became chaos. The Dominion's larger ships couldn't target the small drones effectively. Their point defense systems were designed for missiles and torpedoes, not swarms of tiny attackers. Ships collided trying to avoid the drones. Some Dominion captains opened fire wildly, hitting their own allies in the confusion. Admiral Taman's smaller Earth ships darted through the chaos, firing on wounded Dominion vessels before jumping away. It was guerrilla warfare in 3 dimensions. The Dominion had more ships and bigger guns. But in close quarters, with obstacles and confusion everywhere, size became a disadvantage. On Mars, Commander Haywan watched the Dominion troop carriers land near her colony. The ground shook as massive ships settled onto the red sand. Ramps dropped, and soldiers in powered armor marched out. They were huge, nearly 3 meters tall, built for war. They expected the colonists to be cowering in their bunkers, ready to surrender. Instead, they found empty buildings and sealed doors. Haywan had evacuated everyone into the tunnel system beneath the colony. The Dominion soldiers spread out, searching for targets. They found only silence and closed airlocks. Now Haywan whispered into her communicator. Charges placed throughout the colony detonated simultaneously. Not big explosions meant to kill, but precise ones targeting structural supports and atmospheric seals. Buildings collapsed. Air vented into space. The Dominion soldiers scrambled for safety as the ground beneath them gave way, dropping them into tunnels that Haywan's people had turned into death traps. The red planet itself became a weapon. Haywan's fighters knew every tunnel, every maintenance shaft, every hidden passage. They struck from unexpected angles and vanished before the Dominion could respond. They collapsed tunnels behind the enemy, trapping them in sections without air or power. They vented atmosphere into occupied areas. Forcing the invaders to retreat or suffocate, the Dominion had conquered hundreds of worlds. But they'd never fought an enemy willing to destroy their own infrastructure rather than let it fall into enemy hands. They'd never faced soldiers who would sacrifice their homes to gain tactical advantage. Back in space, Engineer Subin watched her screens nervously. The gravity weapons had worked. The drones were working, but the Dominion was adapting quickly. They were learning to avoid the gravity wells and clearing the drone fields with area effect weapons. Earth needed something bigger. Launch the antimatter missiles, she ordered, her voice shaking slightly. Test units 1 through 5. These weapons were humanity's most desperate creation. They used antimatter as fuel, creating chain reactions that could consume entire ships. But they were unstable. The test simulations had shown a 40% failure rate. Subin had argued against using them. Admiral Taman had overruled her. They needed every weapon they had. The first missile launched from a hidden platform near the asteroid belt. It accelerated toward a cluster of Dominion battleships, its exotic matter containment fields barely holding. Subin watched the telemetry, praying it would work. The missile traveled for 30 seconds before its containment failed. The explosion happened inside Earth's own defensive perimeter, catching a squadron of human frigates in the blast. 20 ships and 300 crew members vanished in a flash of light. Subin felt sick. Abort the remaining launches, she said. Negative, Admiral Taman's voice came through her communicator. Launch Missile 2. Adjust the containment field based on Missile 1's failure data. Subin wanted to argue, to refuse, to stop this madness. But hundreds were already dead. Thousands more would die if they lost. She made the adjustments and launched the second missile. This one traveled for 2 minutes, before striking a Dominion dreadnought at the center of their formation. The antimatter reaction created a miniature star, a sphere of pure energy that expanded outward. The dreadnought didn't explode. It simply ceased to exist, converted to energy in an instant. The blast wave caught 30 more Dominion ships, melting them like wax near a flame. The Dominion fleet recoiled. They'd lost more ships in this single battle than they'd lost in the last century of conquest. Their commanders sent urgent messages back to the Empire's core worlds. This wasn't supposed to happen. Primitive species didn't fight back like this. They didn't have weapons that could destroy dreadnoughts. Captain Hyanwu saw the enemy fleet beginning to reorganize. They were pulling back, forming proper battle lines, bringing their heavy ships forward. The chaos that had given Earth an advantage was ending. Now would come the real test. "All stations, this is Sentinel-7. He broadcast on all frequencies. They're bringing up their main fleet. When they come, they'll come hard. Make every shot count. Make them remember that we don't die easy." His words were barely finished when Sentinel-7's sensors screamed a warning. A Dominion supercarrier was accelerating straight toward his station, flanked by a dozen escorts. They had identified his gravity weapon as a major threat and were coming to eliminate it. Hyanwu looked at his crew. Young faces, scared but determined. He'd trained with these people for years. "It's been an honor," he said simply. They nodded, understanding what was about to happen. Sentinel-7 couldn't run. It couldn't escape. But it could make one final stand as the Dominion ships closed in. Hyanwu pushed his gravity generators to maximum power, far beyond their safety limits. The station shook. Alarms screamed. But the gravity well expanded, catching the supercarrier and pulling it toward the station. Like a black hole pulling in light, the Dominion commander tried to retreat. But momentum and the distorted space trapped them. Their ship slammed into Sentinel-7 at impossible speed. Both vessels exploded in a fireball visible from Earth's surface. President G1 watched from the bunker as another light appeared in the night sky. Another station lost. Another crew dead. But the Dominion fleet was hurting. For the first time in their history, they were facing a species that bit back hard enough to draw blood. 6 months changed everything and nothing. Earth still fought, but the cost was written in scars across the solar system. The Dominion had blockaded every route in and out, cutting off trade and supplies. Cities on Earth went dark to conserve power. Food grew in underground farms beneath rubble that used to be buildings. Children learned to recognize the sound of orbital bombardments and how long they had to reach the shelters, Admiral. Taman commanded what remained of the defense fleet from a hidden base in the asteroid belt. His forces had shrunk to a quarter of their original strength. Ships limped along with patched hulls and jury-rigged systems. Every battle cost lives Earth couldn't replace. But they kept fighting, kept moving, kept striking at Dominion supply lines like ghosts that refused to die. The Dominion was bleeding too, though their leaders tried to hide it. 3 of their member species had started asking uncomfortable questions. Why was this war taking so long? Why were so many ships being destroyed by primitives? The casualties kept climbing. And the Dominion's propaganda machine struggled to explain how a species that should have been crushed in days was still fighting after half a year. Pilot Menesio flew reconnaissance missions through enemy-controlled space in a stealth ship barely larger than a fighter. Her job was to map Dominion positions, identify targets, and survive long enough to report back. She'd lost count of how many close calls she'd had, how many times enemy sensors had swept past her hiding spot while she held her breath and prayed. On this mission, she found something unexpected: a Dominion communication relay station, isolated and poorly defended. Menesio scanned it from a distance, recording everything. The data she collected would help plan future attacks. But as she monitored their transmissions, she discovered something more valuable than targeting data. The Dominion was lying. Their broadcasts claimed overwhelming strength, but their internal communications told a different story. Supply problems, morale issues, ships refusing to deploy to the Sol system. And beneath all of it, Menesio found something that made her pause. Many of the Dominion's member species hadn't joined willingly. They'd been conquered centuries ago and ruled through fear ever since. "Oh, the whole thing's a bluff," she whispered to herself, staring at the data. "They're not strong. They just convinced everyone they are." She transmitted the data back to base and jumped away before the Dominion could detect her. What she'd discovered would change everything. On Mars, Commander Hay-1 had transformed the colony from a settlement into a fortress. Every tunnel was trapped. Every intersection was a potential ambush point. The Dominion controlled the surface, but beneath the red sand, humanity ruled. Her resistance fighters struck at night, destroying Dominion equipment and vanishing before reinforcements could arrive. the Dominion tried to force them out with brutal tactics. They rounded up civilians they'd captured and executed them publicly, broadcasting the deaths as warnings. They burned supply depots and collapsed tunnel entrances. They did everything their training said would break a resistance movement. It had the opposite effect. Every execution created more fighters. Every family that lost someone to Dominion cruelty became willing to risk everything for revenge. HFY's network grew despite the danger. Young and old, engineers and farmers, everyone found ways to resist. Mars became a planet of insurgents, and the Dominion couldn't pacify it without destroying the very resources they'd come to claim. President G1 operated from a bunker that moved every 3 days. The Dominion hunted her constantly, seeing Earth's leader as a key target. She'd aged visibly in 6 months, her hair gray now, lines deep around her eyes. But her voice remained steady when she addressed her people, and her resolve never wavered. She recorded a new message, one that would be transmitted in every direction to every species the Dominion controlled. The transmission was encrypted and scattered across thousands of relay points, making it nearly impossible to block completely. To all who live under Dominion rule, she began. You've been told they're invincible. You've been shown recordings of worlds destroyed, civilizations erased. They taught you that resistance is death. We're here to tell you that's a lie. The recording showed footage from the war. Dominion ships burning, their soldiers retreating, human fighters standing over destroyed enemy equipment. We're not stronger than them. We're not smarter. We're just refusing to kneel. And in 6 months, we've hurt them badly enough that their own people are questioning the Empire. If humans can do this, imagine what you could do. Imagine what we could all do together. The message ended with coordinates for encrypted communication channels, an invitation to coordinate, to share intelligence, to plan together. President G1 knew the Dominion would intercept it. She was counting on it. Let them know their subjects were thinking about rebellion. Let them spread their forces thinner, trying to maintain control. Engineer Suben worked in a laboratory hidden beneath what used to be Seoul. She'd been refining the antimatter weapons, making them more stable. The failure rate was down to 15% now. Still too high, but better. She'd also been reverse engineering captured Dominion technology. Learning their secrets, the breakthrough came from studying their faster-than-light drives. The Dominion controlled all the jump gates, artificial structures that allowed ships to travel between stars. Capturing or destroying a gate took months. But Subin found something in the wreckage of Dominion ships. Their drives didn't need the gates. They could jump independently. The gates just made it easier and more efficient. We can go anywhere, she said, staring at the equations on her screen. We're not trapped in Seoul anymore. Implications were staggering. Earth could strike anywhere in Dominion space without warning. Supply lines, shipyards, even core worlds. The strategic situation had just transformed from defensive siege to potential offensive operations. Admiral Taman received Subin's report and immediately began planning. We need a demonstration, he said. Something that proves we can reach them anywhere. Something that terrifies their leadership as much as they've tried to terrify us. Pilot Menesio volunteered for the mission before Taman finished explaining it. I'll go, she said simply. I've been in their space. I know their patrol patterns. I can get through. The mission was simple in concept and nearly impossible in execution. Menesio would lead a small strike force to the Dominion capital itself. They wouldn't try to win a battle. They'd just prove they could reach the heart of the Empire. Hit something symbolic, broadcast a message, and escape before the defenses could respond. 12 ships left the asteroid belt, using the new independent jump drives. They materialized in the Dominion capital system. 3 light-years from Earth, behind enemy lines in the most heavily defended space in the galaxy. Alarms screamed across the system as the Dominion detected unauthorized arrivals. Min-SEO didn't waste time on speeches. Her fighters accelerated toward the planet, dodging defensive fire. They weren't targeting military installations. That would take too long. Instead, they aimed for the Grand Assembly building where the Dominion's ruling council met. It was symbolic. It was protected. And it was about to get a very rude surprise. Missiles streaked toward the building. Point defenses intercepted most of them, but 3 got through. The explosions weren't large enough to destroy the structure, but they carved visible scars into its facade. More importantly, they proved it could be done. Min-SEO broadcast on all frequencies as her fighters turned to escape. You came to our home? Now we've come to yours. Nowhere is safe. No one is untouchable. This is what resistance looks like. Tell your slaves they can fight back. The escape was harder than the arrival. Dominion ships were scrambling to intercept. Minicio's squadron jumped away just as enemy fire began bracketing their position. 2 ships didn't make it, but 10 did. The mission was a success. Back on Earth, President G1 watched the recordings. The Dominion capital burning. Their grand building scarred. Their arrogance pierced. She allowed herself a small smile. The war was far from over. But the Dominion's grip on fear was loosening. Commander Hay-1 received a coded transmission from an unexpected source. A representative of the Krell, one of the Dominion's enslaved species, wanted to talk. They'd been monitoring Earth's resistance. They'd seen the strike on the capital. They wanted to help. Can't rebel openly yet, the Krell representative said, but we can make their supply lines fail. We can ensure ships break down at crucial moments. We can provide intelligence. The Dominion has enemies everywhere now. They just don't know it yet. Hay-1 accepted the alliance. Earth had its first non-human ally. The Galactic War was becoming something more. Something the Dominion feared above all else. A revolution. The Dominion's propaganda machine went into overdrive trying to explain what happened at their capital. They called it a terrorist attack. They claimed minimal damage. They insisted the Empire remained strong. But across thousands of worlds, billions of beings had seen the recordings. The untouchable had been touched. The invincible had been wounded. Questions spread like wildfire through populations taught never to question Captain. Dayun commanded the newly rebuilt carrier Inchin's Pride, leading humanity's first offensive operation beyond Sol. Intelligence from their Krell allies identified a shipyard in the Proxima system as vulnerable. The Dominion had never needed rear area defenses before. They'd never imagined an enemy could reach that far behind their lines. Dayun's fleet jumped into Proxima space and found the intelligence was accurate. A dozen partially built warships floated in construction frames, protected by only a handful of patrol ships. The Dominion captains scattered when Earth's fleet appeared, not even attempting to defend the yard. They'd heard stories about the humans who refused to die and terror won over duty. The shipyard burned. Millions of tons of refined metal and advanced systems melted in the fire. Dayun's forces captured 3 completed ships that hadn't yet been crewed. More importantly, they captured the construction logs and design specifications. Earth would learn to build proper warships now, not just improvised weapons platforms. This is for Mars, Dayun broadcast as the shipyard exploded. This is for Europa. This is for every colony you destroyed. We're coming for the rest. On Mars, Commander Hay-1 met with the Krell representative in a sealed tunnel deep beneath the surface. The alien looked vaguely reptilian, with scales that shimmered in the dim light. They spoke through a translation device, their actual language consisting of clicks and whistles. My people have been under Dominion control for 300 years, the Krell said. They conquered us through the same method they tried with you. Show overwhelming force. Demand surrender. Promise mercy. We believed them. We've regretted it ever since. Why help us now? Hay-1 asked, because you proved it's possible to resist? In 300 years, we never saw anyone say no to the Dominion. We thought it was impossible. You taught the galaxy that impossible just means no one's tried hard enough yet. The Krell provided detailed maps of Dominion supply routes and communication networks. They identified ships with disloyal crews, commanders who questioned orders, and systems where resistance movements were forming. The information was invaluable. More valuable still was what it represented. The Dominion's subjects were ready to turn on their masters. President G1 addressed the United Earth Council. With news she could barely believe, 4 more species have made contact. They're not ready to rebel openly, but they're conducting sabotage. Dominion logistics are falling apart. Ships are suffering mysterious malfunctions. Supplies are being lost in transit. The Empire is starting to eat itself from within. She brought up a holographic map of the galaxy. Red marked Dominion-controlled space, which was most of it. But now yellow marks appeared throughout, showing systems where resistance was active. This is no longer just humanity's war. We've started something that's spreading. The question now is whether we can coordinate it, guide it, before the Dominion crushes each rebellion separately. Engineer Subin presented her latest breakthrough to Admiral Taman. She'd refined the independent jump drives to the point where they were reliable. Earth could now deploy strike forces anywhere in the galaxy with minimal warning. We can hit 10 targets simultaneously, she explained. Make them spread their defenses across everything they control. Make them defend everywhere, which means they defend nowhere effectively. Taman studied the tactical projections. They'll retaliate, probably by making examples of rebellious populations. We need to be ready for that. They're already doing that, Subin said quietly. The Krell homeworld. 2 billion dead. The Dominion commander ordered it as a warning to other species. The news had reached Earth just hours earlier. Admiral Young Su, Supreme Commander of Dominion Military Forces, had responded to Krell's sabotage by ordering a complete planetary bombardment. Nuclear weapons had turned the Krell homeworld into a radioactive wasteland. Survivors were being hunted down systematically. The genocide was meant to terrify other species into submission. It had the opposite effect. Rage replaced fear. 4 more species began open rebellion. Dominion soldiers returned to their barracks and found them sabotaged. Ships jumped to combat zones and discovered their navigation data had been corrupted. The Empire's infrastructure, built on the labor of conquered species, began crumbling as those species stopped cooperating. Pilot. Menesio led a squadron tasked with contacting resistance cells throughout Dominion space. She jumped from system to system, spending just hours in each location. Her ships delivered weapons, technical specifications, and communication equipment. More importantly, they delivered hope. Each cell she visited learned they weren't alone, that humanity and others were coordinating a galaxy-wide uprising. In a binary star system called Hadria, she met with representatives from 6 different species. They met on an abandoned mining station, each group arriving in stealth ships. Menesio saw species she'd never imagined, beings made of crystalline structures, others that floated in gas-filled suits, some that looked almost human, and others completely alien. Earth is organizing a coalition, she told them. Not an empire. Not a new dominion. An alliance of equals where every species has a voice. Are you interested? The representatives looked at each other. A crystalline being spoke, their voice chiming like bells. What guarantees do we have that Earth won't simply replace the Dominion? That you won't become the new oppressors? None, Menesio said honestly. We're figuring this out as we go. But I can tell you this. We're dying for the principle that no one should kneel to anyone. If we were building a new empire, we'd be doing it the easy way, accepting surrender from species that want to join us. But President G1 has refused every offer of vassalage. She says we either all stand as equals or we deserve to lose. The crystalline being chimed thoughtfully. Then we will take that risk. Send us the coordinates for your coalition. The Hadrians will join. Admiral Taman coordinated what would become known as Simultaneous Uprising Day, on a single pre-arranged date. Rebellions would erupt across 30 Dominion-controlled systems simultaneously. Earth would provide air support and supplies where possible. The goal wasn't to win everywhere immediately, but to stretch the Dominion's forces so thin it couldn't effectively suppress any single rebellion. The day arrived. Across the galaxy, slaves became soldiers. Workers seized factories. Soldiers turned on their officers. Civilian populations rose up against occupation forces. The Dominion's response was immediate and brutal, but they couldn't be everywhere at once. For every rebellion they crushed, 2 more erupted in new locations. Captain Dayun's carrier group provided support to a rebellion on a mining world called Kepler 442. The local species, called the Telvan, had taken control of the planet's surface, but couldn't hold against Dominion orbital bombardment. Dao jumped her fleet into the system and engaged the Dominion ships while evacuation ships lifted civilians to safety. The battle was fierce. The Dominion ships were larger and more powerful, but they were also dealing with sabotage from their own crew members. Telvan conscripts, who'd been forced into Dominion service, chose that moment to mutiny, fighting for control of their own ships. The confusion gave Dayun's forces the opening. They needed to destroy half the Dominion fleet before jumping. Away President Juwan officially established the Coalition of Free Worlds in a ceremony, broadcast across liberated space. Representatives from 12 species gathered in a temporary assembly on a liberated station. Each species had one vote, equal voice, equal representation. It was messy and chaotic, with translation issues and cultural misunderstandings everywhere. But it was democratic. "We're not building an empire," Jiwan said to the assembled representatives. "We're building something the galaxy has never seen. A civilization where strength comes from cooperation, not conquest. Where diversity is valued, not suppressed. It won't be easy. We'll argue and disagree. But we'll do it as equals." The Coalition's first major coordinated action was a rescue mission. The survivors of the Krell genocide were scattered across space, hunted by Dominion forces. Coalition ships jumped into a dozen systems simultaneously, extracting refugees under fire. Thousands of Krell were saved and brought to Coalition-protected space. Among them was a young Krell named Syrah, who'd lost her entire family in the bombardment. She stood before President G1 with nothing but the clothes she wore and fury in her eyes. "Why?" she demanded. "Why did you start this? Why didn't you just surrender? My family would still be alive." G1 met her gaze steadily. "Because if we'd surrendered, your family would have lived as slaves. Your children would have lived as slaves. Your children's children would never have known freedom. The price is terrible. The price of slavery is worse." Syrah stared at her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Then I want to fight. Teach me. Let me make them pay." 2 years after the Dominion demanded Earthbow, their empire was collapsing. Half their territory was in open revolt. Supply lines had disintegrated. Member species that once enforced the empires will now fought each other or joined the Coalition. Admiral Yang Su, the Dominion's supreme commander, ordered a complete withdrawal to the core systems. The outer colonies were abandoned, left to burn or join the rebellion as they chose. President G1 stood in the newly constructed Coalition Assembly Hall on a reclaimed station. 70 species were represented now, each with delegates arguing, debating, and slowly learning to work together. It was chaos. It was democracy. It was everything the Dominion had never been. "We're not done yet," she reminded the assembly. "The Dominion still controls 1,000 systems. They still have the largest fleet in the galaxy. They're wounded, but a wounded animal is the most dangerous. We need to finish this, or they'll rebuild and come for us again in a generation." Admiral Taman presented the final battle plan to the Coalition Military Council. It was ambitious to the point of insanity, a direct assault on the Dominion core worlds. Not a raid. Not sabotage. A full military invasion designed to break the Empire permanently. "They're expecting us to siege them," Taman explained, pointing at the holographic display. "They've pulled back to defensive positions, preparing for a long war of attrition. Instead, we're going to hit them everywhere at once, overwhelm their defenses through sheer volume of attacks. We have more ships now than they do. We have better intelligence, and we have something they'll never have. Soldiers who believe in what they're fighting for." The invasion fleet assembled in secret over 3 months. Coalition ships from 100 worlds gathered in deep space, away from Dominion sensors. Captain Dayun commanded one of the largest carrier groups, Urinshin's Pride, now the flagship of an entire battle fleet. She looked at the assembled forces with wonder. 2 years ago, Earth stood alone. Now they led an alliance that spanned the galaxy. Pilot Minesco had been promoted to squadron leader. She commanded 30 fighters, each crewed by pilots from different species who'd learned to fight together. Her squadron had the most dangerous job. They'd jump ahead of the main fleet and take out the Dominion's early warning systems. No margin for error. No backup if things went wrong. Commander Haywan had left Mars to take command of ground forces. The liberation of occupied worlds would require soldiers who understood urban warfare and insurgency. Her forces were a mix of species, all veterans of resistance movements. They didn't just know how to fight. They knew how to survive when everything seemed lost. Engineer Subin worked around the clock to keep the Coalition fleet operational. Ships from 70 different species meant 70 different types of technology, all needing to work together. She'd created universal interfaces and communication protocols. It was messy and imperfect, but it worked well enough. The invasion began with Minisio's squadron jumping into the Dominion's sensor network. They appeared in 12 locations simultaneously, destroying monitoring stations before the Dominion even realized they were under attack. Within minutes, the Empire was blind to what was coming. The main fleet jumped into Dominion core space like an avalanche. Thousands of ships materialized in coordinated positions surrounding key Dominion worlds. Admiral Taman broadcast one simple message: surrender now, face fair trial, and live. Fight, and we will show you the same mercy you showed the Krell. Some Dominion ships opened fire immediately. Others hesitated. Many simply powered down their weapons and transmitted surrender codes. The Dominion's fleet was crewed by conscripts from conquered species. When given a choice between dying for their oppressors or joining their liberators, the choice was easy. The Battle of Dominion Prime lasted 18 hours. Yang Su, the Dominion commander, fought desperately with the ships still loyal to him. His personal guard made their last stand around the Imperial throne world. They were professional soldiers, well-trained and equipped, but they were also outnumbered 50-1. Captain Dayun's carriers launched wave after wave of fighters. The sky above the Dominion capital planet filled with ships from both sides. Energy weapons painted the darkness with light. Ships exploded and burned. The debris field grew so thick that navigation became a challenge. Haywan's ground forces landed under fire, their dropships taking hits from surface defenses. She led her soldiers through the Imperial Palace complex, fighting through corridors filled with elite guards. The battle was brutal and personal, hand-to-hand combat in the halls of power. But her forces had been training for urban warfare. While the Dominion Guard had spent decades on ceremonial duty, they found the Dominion Emperor in his throne room, sitting alone. His advisors had fled. His guards had died. He sat on his throne, an old being from a species humanity had never encountered, and waited for the end. "Will you kill me?" he asked as Haywan entered. "That's not my decision," she replied. "You'll face trial. Answer for what you've done. Every species you conquered deserves that much." The Emperor laughed bitterly. "A trial. How civilized. How very unlike the savages we thought you were." President Juan arrived on Dominion Prime 3 days after the battle ended. The planet was secured, the fighting over. She walked through the Imperial Palace, seeing the symbols of power that had ruled the galaxy for 1,000 years. Statues of past emperors, murals depicting glorious conquests, all of it built on the suffering of trillions. The formal surrender was signed in the same Grand Assembly Hall that had once ordered Earth's subjugation. The Emperor's signature made it official. The Dominion was dissolved. Its territory would be divided among its former subjects. Its military would be disbanded. Its leaders would face justice. Admiral Taman oversaw the occupation of former Dominion territory. It wasn't about conquest. Coalition forces were there to maintain order while new governments formed, to protect populations from revenge killings, and to ensure the transition to democracy was as smooth as possible. It would take years, maybe decades, but it had to be done right. Engineer Subin led the technological exchange program. The Dominion had hoarded advanced technology, keeping their subject species deliberately limited. Now that knowledge would be shared freely. Subin worked with scientists from every coalition species, combining their different approaches to create innovations none could have achieved alone. the war crimes. Tribunals began 6 months after the surrender. Admiral Yong-Soo was the first major defendant. The evidence against him was overwhelming: genocide, mass murder, use of forbidden weapons. The Krell survivors demanded execution. The prosecution argued for it. The defense barely tried to deny the crimes. The tribunal deliberated for weeks. In the end, they chose rehabilitation over revenge. Yong-Soo would spend the rest of his life rebuilding what he'd destroyed, working on the Krell homeworld to clean up the radiation and make it habitable again. It was a punishment that would last decades. A life sentence of hard labor, undoing his crimes. Not everyone agreed with the decision. Some called it too soft. Others praised it as showing the Coalition's commitment to justice over vengeance. The debate raged across Coalition space, which was exactly how it should work. Democracy was messy. Democracy meant disagreement. But democracy meant everyone had a voice. Pilot Minesio retired from military service after the war. She took a teaching position at the new Coalition Military Academy, training the next generation of pilots. Students from dozens of species learned from her. Hearing stories about the early days when Earth stood alone against impossible odds. "Why did you fight?" a young Krell student asked her during one class. "You could have surrendered, lived as servants. Why choose to die instead?" Minesio considered the question carefully. Because some things matter more than living. Freedom matters. Dignity matters. The right to choose your own path matters. We didn't fight because we wanted to die. We fought because we wanted to live as free beings, not as property. Captain Dayun took command of the Coalition's new exploration fleet. With the war over, ships could be used for their original purpose, exploring the unknown. Her carriers ventured beyond Dominion space, making first contact with species who'd never known the Empire. She made sure those first meetings were peaceful, respectful, and honest about both the Coalition's ideals and its flaws. Commander Haewon established the Coalition Defense Force, a military organization designed to protect against external threats without becoming an oppressive force itself. Every member species contributed soldiers, but none could dominate. Command rotated between species. Oversight was provided by civilian councils. It was complicated and inefficient, but it prevented any single species from using the military to seize power. President Ji-won addressed the Coalition Assembly on the second anniversary of the war's end. The hall was filled with representatives from over 100 species now, each one free to speak their mind and cast their vote. 2 years ago, Earth stood alone, she began. We faced an empire that had conquered everything it touched. We had no reason to believe we could win, but we fought anyway, because surrender meant losing everything that made us human. Today we've proven that freedom isn't just worth fighting for. It's achievable, it's sustainable, and it's something we can build together.